Q&A answers video after my 1500 Q&A subscribers contest. I've got a page and a bit to go here. We'll have to see how we go at getting through them. And there's a few video ones left to go as well, so let's work our way through them. So next is from Gruss Newton, and I suppose Little Frank as well. So, what's your go-to game? So we'll go strictly retro. I do have some go-to modern games as well, but actually my go-to game is actually to switch on the vertical arcade cabinet, which is, I'm looking directly at it here, a bit hard to show you, and I'll probably either have a game of Time Pilot or Gyrus, or even something like, if I want to really punish myself, something like Phoenix. Phoenix is actually a damn hard game. Just a simple shooter that I can get a bit of a way through and just have a nice relaxing time. And that's also why I generally think I collect shooters as well, because you can just simply plug them in, and play them for a little while and have a bit of fun. 2. Which simple retro game do you wish you would have thought of and developed? Oh, there's so many of those. It probably harkens back to right back to the early 8-bit days, and I'd go for something like Manic Miner. Manic Miner invented that whole genre of pixel perfect platform games that some people love, or lots of people love, and there's also a majority of people who hate as well for the frustration that they caused. But just something like that was a fairly simple concept, and I think you can see it in some of the games that I developed as well. I mean, I pretty much wrote my own version of Manic Miner, and I wrote a couple of other platform games as well. Platform games have always been one of my favourite styles of games, you know, probably going back to Donkey Kong days and everything like that as well. So number 3, 8-bit or 16-bit era, what is the most fun for you? I am really interested in the 16-bit systems and the extra graphics, and I do have fun playing those games, but time and time again, and also when I ask myself the question, if I ever did cut systems, which are the ones that I would definitely not like to let go of, and it comes back to the 8-bits. So I still, you know, even though I don't play them as much nowadays, like I haven't fired up the Intellivision for ages as an example, but I still do on occasion when I get a chance fire up the Atari 2600, and of course you've got the ColecoVision, which is so closely related to my MSX machines. I really couldn't let the 8-bit systems go, and the 16-bit systems, I just don't have quite that same nostalgia feeling for the 16-bit systems, even though in a way they were some of the first console systems that I actually owned myself. So yeah. Okay, so thank you very much, Gruss, for your questions. Now we have one question from I'm not sure how you pronounce his Levotages, I think. I'll pop it up there. I've made a mess of that. Do you think Japanese game versions have more authentic looks than PAL or US games? Now, I suppose Japanese games have a lot more, and I mean, and quite often they don't change the graphics in the game. It's mainly the packaging material and stuff like that. I do actually find the Japanese packaging and art style to be a lot more in feeling with the game itself, you know, they put a lot more characterization into it. There of course are some Japanese games where sometimes where the Western cover is better, but it's more often the other way around, and you generally do find that it's the Japanese system that has the better cover. So, and it is more in tune with the game, whereas sometimes for Western images they just seem to have picked some action hero sort of thing and chucked it on the front if they thought it was an action game. And there's some very weird covers indeed that don't really match the subject matter. So I hope that's what you meant. Sorry for the slight cut. I guarantee you I cannot try and make a video without getting you interrupted. Right, next is Steve36207. What was your go-to arcade game back in the day? I suppose I've sort of already covered that because, you know, I've mentioned the thing, but it really was any time an arcade had a Time Pilot machine, I would play it and play it a lot. But not every arcade had a Time Pilot machine, so I would play something like Scramble or Moon Patrol, so a couple of the horizontal games. But yeah, primarily one, it'd have to be Time Pilot. And another game which was even rarer, there weren't that many, there was only one arcade around that I knew around here, was Tutankhamun. So, but yes, it's hard to beat your go-to game if nobody actually has it. 2, if you could put yourself in any game, what would it be? Put myself in any game. Well, it'd have to be some RPG or something like that. And I'm just trying to think of a good example. I hate it when I get stuck. Probably one of the Dungeons and Dragons type games. Always been a fan of Dungeons and Dragons. So you know, you're Icewind Dale or something like that. So and probably a mage. Always used to like playing mages or a dual character and things like that. So yeah. A cartoon you would love to see as a game. Now I know there technically is a game, although I believe Cinematic used to love the cartoon Star Blazers, and it's the whole thing of large ship and with fighters and everything like that go out on missions. I mean, I suppose there are games that have been based off those concepts, but it's just a game with a bit of an action component that involves spaceships and larger capital ships. So there you go. Great questions. Now, Novabug, who did a video set of questions. So what we'll do, we'll cut to him here. I'm going to put his whole video in because he mixed it in with something else. So here's Novabug.
You gone? Right. So it's just me and you now, Tone. Questions for you, mate. Congratulations, firstly, of course. I should say that first, shouldn't I? Get my order of words right. First question. You talk about the ColecoVision, you talk about the SG-1000 a lot, and all them kind of second generation / third generation consoles. And I would like to know if you had the ability to do it, like the magician's back. Patty's magician is back. If you had the ability to do it, would you make a fantasy console of all them systems from the time, you know, the Intellivision, the Spectro Video, and the Atari 2600, and all them? Take all their best elements and mesh them all into one console. Tell me what elements of what systems would you do that to, and if it would be possible. I would like to know that, because I know you favour the Coleco and stuff like that, but like I always said, I always favour the AM strategy. No, but the reality in me says, well, if you took parts of the Commodore and you took parts of the Spectrum and then mixed them with the Amstrad, then you get a perfect 8-bit home computer. That's the way I would see it. So I'd like to know your version of that, Tone, with all the second generation consoles from your programming days. The second question would be, if you weren't living in Tasmania. You do live in Tasmania, don't you? If I've got that wrong, shoot me now. If you weren't living down under, I'll just say down under because it's like a umbrella term, and you were living somewhere else in the world when you were doing programming your first games, what programming environment would you have liked to have grown up in? Would it be the Japan scene? Would it have been the American scene? Or would it have been the British scene? Because that would be interesting to know, because the British scene was massive during the 80s and the early 90s, wasn't it? And America obviously sprung up. Japan went ballistic, and they've all got their merits and they've all got their strengths and all got their weaknesses. And I'd like to know which one of them three would you have preferred to sort of be an environment and develop and write games. The third question is, Yeah, tricky one, because I don't know it. I did have it, and it's just flown out of my head like the sparrows. Gone. Do you like Dizzy games? There you go. I'll just keep it nice and simple. Do you like the Dizzy games? And if you say no, that's the wrong answer, isn't it? Anyway, well done, mate, with the 1,500 subscribers. He needs more. Go and check his channel out. It's in the description box as well. Electric Adventures. I've been subscribed to him for basically nearly my entire duration on YouTube, and I find his stuff brilliant. The homebrew stuff, fantastic. Massive collection the man has. Very good at responding to the Friday foursomes as well. He's one of my top Friday foursomers, and I do like my foursomers. I love my foursomers dearly. So I will bid you farewell. That's my retro waffle over. All hail Dizzy. Go and play it. Go and play it. It's in the browser. You don't even have to do anything. Open the browser and play it. Experience the egg. Experience the yolk folk. Novabug. Out.
Alright, now, Novabug's first question was a fantasy console made up of my favourite elements of the 8-bit systems. I suppose I'd have to, obviously most of the components are going to come from my favourite system, which is an MSX machine, but you see that wasn't, I suppose we're missing consoles and computers, but I mean consoles lasted longer and than computers. Computers only had a short space of time when they were around, and if, as an example, so MSX had lots of colours, the same resolution of the spectrum and hardware sprites, but it couldn't scroll the screen. So your Commodore 64 and even the NES, which is actually quite a restricted console in the number of colours it can display. It has hardware sprites, but it can scroll the screen. So, and the Coleco, obviously, since it was pretty much based off the same design as the MSX, also couldn't scroll the screen, and it was very difficult to do so, and also having a lot less RAM. So what you want is a mixture of a machine with a large amount of RAM, so you need at least 64K, and you need hardware sprites, so you definitely need hardware sprites, and larger ones are the better, but it also needs to be able to hardware scroll the screen, so move around in less than 8 pixel chunks. Now, as far as music from the 8-bit, strictly the 8-bit days, you definitely have to go with the SID chip or the Pokey chip. So the SID chip from the Commodore 64 or the Pokey chip from the Atari 8-bits. I'd still go over Z80 because it's easier to program, and if you've got those other bits of hardware helping it along, you can actually do quite good graphics, as the PC Engine is an example. So you'd probably want, and probably more hardware added into the graphics. So if we sneak bits of the Master System is an example of a pre-PC Engine one, where they just made a couple of enhancements to what was the MSX's graphics chip by adding the horizontal and vertical scrolling, and changing the way the colours were mapped to get around some of the restrictions, and you actually got quite powerful games with a Z80 driving things, and very good. But this Master System was let down by its sound. So I suppose, coming the full circle, your perfect combination would probably be a Master System with either a SID or a Pokey sound chip, and you'd probably have a damn near perfect 8-bit console. How's that? Not too bad, I suppose. Now, number 2, which scene would you have liked to have grown up in? So obviously I'm always been down here, right at the bottom of the world here in Tasmania, which is an island to the south of Australia, for those that don't know. Go and look it up. And when I was discovering computers and learning how to program, I mostly taught myself, which a lot of the people back in the day did. But I only had like a couple of local shops, and I only had the market that was available here. So had I been in the UK, I'm sure that some of my titles would have been, I mean, some of the programmers back then, they just went to their local shop and their local shop started selling them, and software houses were, you know, sometimes a couple of doors down the street, and they got introduced to those and they got a job. I would have loved a job in the industry back in the day. Probably the UK for the energy and the you know, that particular exciting times of just getting in, developing a game yourself and seeing it published out there. But on the quality and the story side of things, Japan also harkens. So it'd probably be my second string. Now the US, of course, there was a lot of software development going on in the US, and the US is actually probably more a hardware sort of area, and didn't really boom properly until a little bit later, actually probably post-crash. So growing up in the US, it would have been a different stream. So I probably tend more towards the UK scene. So, yeah, I would have loved growing up back in the day and having my stuff published by other people rather than having to do it myself. He ran out of steam, and his third question, he says, do I like Dizzy games? Well, there's a little bit of an issue there. I actually didn't own a Spectrum back in the day because you couldn't buy them. I always wanted one. I always read about magazines, and there were Amstrads, but I could never afford one, so I played somebody else's. So I've never actually played a Dizzy game, so probably going to shoot me down in flames. But I've already said in a question for another person in this video is that I quite like the pixel perfect platform games, which Dizzies are part of the genre. So I probably would enjoy them. And I mean, it's the same with whether they be the Spectrum or the Amstrad versions, it doesn't really matter. So there are games that I am yet to discover that I will probably enjoy. So there you go. I hope that answers your question. So next is from Atari Fitness. A guy who's had many names over the last couple of years for his channel. Number one, what game would you make if money was no object? Well, once you're going to have to go back to RPG stakes. I think you would want a open world game based on Dungeons and Dragons rules with a continuously evolving storyline. So in other words, they have more, unlimited money to be able to continually pump new storylines and things like that. So you can continue, the game doesn't stop basically, so you can continue developing your character and almost like inhabit that world. Although I'm sure that would, there's already people addicted to certain games, and that probably wouldn't help them out at all. Number two, what has been your biggest achievement so far in your life? Well, I'm going to have to say, as a father, my 4 girls. I can't answer anything other than that because they are definitely my biggest achievement in my life. I'm very proud of all 4 of my children. And it's really interesting as a father seeing them grow up now. My oldest is now 20, so I've got 20, 19, 15 and 9 in ages, quite a spread there. They are all different, they are all intelligent and have different interests, and I love them basically. They are my pride. Number 3, how would you make the games you are playing better? It seems amazing nowadays. You have these modern games and they spend so much money making them, but they also seem so short. Everybody's complaining on how short they are. They seem to be spending a lot of money on not a lot of content, and you can see this more and more swing towards less story and everything being driven by online, multiplayer online gaming. So in other words, so they don't have to create the story. And that's, I suppose, the trouble with games, is modern games. The systems have got so powerful, you almost need to be like Hollywood studio size to be able to make a lot of them. But at the end of the day, then somebody can bring out a game like Shovel Knight as an example from a small studio, and it's still just a fun as fun game as one of those games that cost millions and millions of dollars to make. So I think games at the moment have lost their creative spark, I suppose, from the main industry. And it is actually good that the indie scene is thriving and has tools to be able to bring out games that are actually sometimes more interesting than the ones by the big companies now. Okay, we finished a page. That's excellent. Let's keep going. Nintendo Arcade, great fellow, and has a wonderful Nintendo collection and some lovely arcade cabs, and he's working on a passion project at the moment to restore an older Nintendo arcade cabinet. Go check his channel out. Okay, number one, what game from your favourite system would you like to have seen made into an arcade game, and why? I'll tell you what. I mean, I love Konami games, so it's going to be a Konami game. And I mean, a lot of Konami games are actual on the MSX, are actual arcade conversions. But Space Mambo is only on the MSX. It's not in the arcade, and I think that game would have made a fantastic arcade game. It has a lot of the aspects of previous Konami shooters, and is a very, very good game. That would be a fantastic game on an arcade cabinet. Horizontal one, of course. Yeah, easy pick, that one. 2, what's your favourite control system for any game? I'd have to say it has to be arcade controls. Now this harkens back to my hands. I unfortunately don't have a very good thumb joint, so control pads you generally fire with your thumbs, and I just can't do that for any length of time. It hurts too much. I get by with the modern pads because you use the shoulder buttons with the modern systems, but for the older consoles, if I don't have an arcade stick, I usually can't play it very much. So definitely an arcade stick. Although I'm not too, I don't go crazy with the number of buttons. Okay, need some coffee. Okay, number 3. Who would you like to design the box art for your next game if money was no option? That's a very interesting question. I didn't really look it up. I'm not actually that familiar with some of the actual artist name, but sorry, I'm struggling with the name. But some of the I love the covers of a lot of the classic sci-fi novels, and I actually have several card collections of artists who did a lot of the sci-fi covers. I'm just really struggling. It's an artist that starts with S, Ferreira or something like that. I'll have to go and have a look, and I'll pop up their name and maybe take a picture of one of the covers and pop it up. But having one of those guys make a cover for my game, any one of my games, would just be an absolutely fantastic experience. It just, a great cover like that, as covered earlier with the Japanese question, really brings a game alive. And back in the day, that first impression when people saw your game on the shelf was the thing that got them to buy it. So the cover played a very big part of that. So yeah, sorry, I'm not that in my head familiar with artist names. So I'll try and correct that with a pop-up. So thank you very much for your questions. So next person is Jam Van 1000. Most famous, well-known game you've worked on. Well, obviously back in the day my main stuff was the MSX titles, and I suppose Julie, it was my Pixidis game, which is my vertical scrolling shoot 'em up, which was noticed by ASCII magazine over in Japan, so much so that they sent me a letter in Jinglish. I mean, I was only about 17, 18 at the time, and they asked for, and this is the wordings in the letter, I really must find that and scan it, they asked for 1,000 samples of Pixidis, and also alluded to perhaps some of my other games as well. So at the time I didn't know whether they wanted me to send 1,000 copies for them to try the market out, and how was I going to afford to make these, because I made all the tapes myself and everything like that. I suppose on retrospect they were saying a sample order, but they didn't talk anything about price or anything like that. And I was only young and I didn't do anything about it. So in a way, it was actually great that my software actually made it to Japan and I was actually known in Japan. So, but to what extent, I actually do not know. I know that in Australia, obviously, for people who owned MSX and Spectre video machines, they knew of me because I actually kept the magazines and the user group going for quite a long time. Favourite Mega Drive Genesis game? I'm just tossing up a couple of games. It's actually going to be between Truxton and Flying Shark. I'll go Truxton. I always have enjoyed that game, and it was. I'm just thinking to the feeling when I finally got back my original copy from my brother-in-law in recent times, and I'd already got a Japanese copy in the meantime. I actually got both of those about the same time. So, but that's a game from back in the day, and I love it on the Genesis, and it's just got that sound and graphic and look that just screams Mega Drive Genesis. So yeah, that'd have to be it, I reckon. Favourite video you made on your channel? It's hard to pick one, but I am very proud of my Let's Make a Retro Game series, and they are not the highest viewed videos on my channel, and they do alright and everything like that, but I enjoy making those the most. And I'm talking about a subject that I like, which is programming, and also retro and 8-bits. So definitely, yeah, that actual series so far. And yes, I do have more of them coming. They take a lot more time to produce than just sitting down and filming a Q&A, unfortunately. So there will be more soon. Thank you very much for your questions. I think I'm only going to answer one more in this section, and then we'll leave the rest for the last part. So, Dumez has been a subscriber for quite some time, I think. Number 1, have you any experience with the Unity engine, and do you plan to code any retro-style game for the new systems anytime, either for free or retail distribution? I have played with the Unity engine, actually mainly to help out one of my daughters with their school project. I haven't used it yet, but I'm sure that it wouldn't take me very long to learn it. I'm actually fairly good at learning the various systems, and once you know the general concepts of physics and movement and controls and game loops and everything like that, they transfer well to other environments. And also saying that I know C very well. I've programmed that in the business world for quite a period of time, all the way back from when Windows 2 came out through. Switched over to C# in the last X number of years because so other people can keep up. Otherwise I'd probably still be using C. Now, and already as part of CollectorVision, they've already asked whether I'd be willing to help out with games for the Wii U. So there is potential, but I can only do so many projects at a time, and for the moment I'd prefer to concentrate on the 8 and 16-bit systems, but at some stage I would like to give them a go, and probably at the moment Unity through Wii U and perhaps some PS4, even some Xbox. It doesn't really matter which system to me. But I will say, with a modern system, you do need a team behind you. You can't write a game like that yourself. You need somebody doing the graphics and sound. So it will definitely be with a team, CollectorVision or otherwise. Question number 2. What are the 3 things you like to spread Vegemite onto? Or the 3 things you can spread it onto that renders Vegemite least offensive? Well, the number 1 thing is crumpets. Absolutely love Vegemite on crumpets. Then another thing that Vegemite is really nice on is Vita Brits, which is a very dry, larger cracker type thing to describe it to other people. And I suppose the third one is toast. It's just a really nice thing. Vegemite, the way to have it is to have it in small amounts added to something else, and then it goes well up to your level of taste. So some people like a little, some other people like a lot, and it really is a good additive to those sort of, I suppose, savoury bases. 3. Have you got any old retro cheesy porno games on the original distribution media? And if so, how about a pick up and play of said games? Probably the closest, I'm going to have to say no, because I don't have any of those, because I mean, I have put a few low bids on. There are actually quite a few MSX Japanese hentai games, because there are, you know, there's over 3,500 games for the MSX system, and there are quite a few. They're actually on an auction right now that I've been watching. There is actually a whole heap. Obviously, somebody traded in 2 MSX computers and a whole lot of those games. I put a bid on a couple of them where I thought the the manga style was quite nice. I believe I have lost every single one because I put like $5 on each one. So no, I don't have any of those, so I can't do a video on it. Very different question to end up there on. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people to go, and I'll do them in the next section. There's 2 actual video questions in them, and we'll finish off with part 6. So thank you to everybody who's asked questions so far. I've really been enjoying these, but I also don't like the videos to go too long. I'm only judging the length by feeling too, because I've got no counter on my camera. Alright, thank you to everybody who's asked questions so far. Thank you to all my subscribers. I'm Electric Adventures, and I'll catch you in the next video.